Hello, Roy here, and welcome to another edition of The Right Has Left. I'm your host, Roy Carton, and as always, we've got so much stuff to talk about from the Trump administration from this past week. Again, for those of you who may be new just following me, here's the story background of why I do this podcast. I was a Republican for some odd 50 years, and yes, I even voted for Donald Trump on his first go-around as a president of the United States. But it wasn't too much into about 6 months of his term that I realized there's something totally different about this guy. And as time went on and this MAGA movement began, I began to do some soul searching into my own soul about the Republican Party that I once knew. And, of course, I immediately disengaged myself from the Republican Party. And I started this podcast, The Right Has Left, because the right, as I once knew it, has left. There is no more Republican Party that I once grew up with and stood for. So, therefore, The Right Has Left podcast was created. So having said that, let's go ahead and get into our news, because I have a lot of it. So U.S. President Donald Trump has signed a potential U-turn, if you want to say that, in his war with China. And this has just become a bouncing, up and down thing, as we all know. And so what's going on here now with China and his continued market volatility is saying that the high tariffs on the Chinese goods will now come down substantially after he said it was going to go up. But Donald Trump says it won't be zero. Trump's remarks was made at a recent White House news event this past week to mark a radical climb down after weeks of tough posturing and his little tit-for-tat retaliation that sent tariffs on China beyond a staggering 145%. Now, 145%, as we all know, is really high for tariffs, and it won't be that high, so says Donald Trump when he was in a question and answer event with the White House reporters in the Oval Office. Now, Trump says it won't be anywhere near that high. It'll come down substantially, but it won't be zero. Now, Trump made the comments when he was asked about Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's remarks earlier this week, when he said that the high tariff rates between the United States and China have effectively created an embargoed trade between the two economies. And we all know that doesn't work. So much for the high tariffs. President Donald Trump also said that this past week that, this little war that he's been having going on with, Jerome Powell, well, guess what? That's also come to an end. As we all remember, he was saying that he was going to try to fire Jerome Powell because he wasn't doing the interest rates the way that he wanted. Now he says he has no intention of firing Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell before his term, leading to the U.S. Central Bank, which ends next year. Now, as you all know, Trump said, no, I'm not going to fire him. So the reporter said, would you please clarify what you're saying? First you said you wanted to get rid of him. Now you're saying you're not going to. And he said, no, I never did say that. It's a remarkable shift for Donald Trump, who recently stated, as you know, that, hey, I don't like Jerome Powell. I'm going to replace him with my own guy. Of course, he can't legally do that. It takes Congress to run the Federal Reserve, because it is a very independent organization that is set aside, and that's the way it's always been created. So you just can't go around and say you're going to do something and then say, no, I am going to fire him, and no, I'm not going to fire him. So, what are you going to say? What else is going on in the news? Well, this young lady. Yes, Karoline Leavitt. Now, she recently had a press conference, and guess who she invited to that press conference? This guy, right-winger conspiracy theorist Tim Pool. And people were just shocked because the way he came in dressed, and secondly, because of the way that Tim Pool was whether this was prearranged or not, his questions. Watch this clip.
Yes, many of the news organizations that are represented in this room have marched in lockstep on false narratives, such as the Very Fine People hoax, the Covington smear, and now what's being called the Maryland Man hoax, where an MS-13 gang member adjudicated by 2 different judges, I believe, is just simply being referred to as a Maryland Man over and over again. Now, in an effort from the White House to expand access to new companies, you've created this new media seat. So I'm wondering if you can comment on, following this expansion, you've had numerous outlets disparage the companies that you've had sit here, as well as the reporters. I'm wondering if you could comment on the unprofessional behavior, as well as elaborate if there's any plans to expand access to new companies.
Sure. Well, we certainly welcome diverse viewpoints in this room, which is one of the reasons we have you in here, and there's many new faces in this room in comparison to the previous administrations. We want to welcome all viewpoints into this room. We welcome unbiased journalists who really care about the truth and the facts and the accuracy, and you rightfully pointed out the Maryland Man story, which I, from this podium, when The Atlantic published it, on that very first day, I came to this podium and said, this is wrong. The press in this room have this story wrong, and we have seen more and more evidence come to the table that we have had all along. We were always right. The president was always on the right side of this issue to deport this illegal criminal from our community.
Now, that was quite interesting, wasn't it? This guy, Tim Pool, wearing a hoodie and a stocking cap, at a White House press conference when everybody else is in ties and slacks and dresses and things like that. Pretty crazy, if you ask me. So what else is going on in the news? America's confidence in President Donald Trump is starting to slip. Yeah, it really, really is. So, President Donald Trump's ability to manage the United States economy has plummeted since he regained the White House. New polls reveal just 37% of Americans now approve of Donald Trump's handling of the economy, according to a recent poll done by Reuters and PSOS. The survey released this past week, on Wednesday to be exact, shows a rating lower than any point during the first term of a U.S. president. A Pew Research Center, a survey also out on this past Wednesday, found that less than half of the United States adults, 45% to be exact, have confidence in Trump's ability to make a good decision about the economy. This represents a 14-point drop from the same poll in November of last year, when 59% of respondents said that they had confidence in Trump's economic decisions. And making the pair of surveys out this past Wednesdays also follows another survey done by CNBC, which they call the All America survey. It registered Donald Trump also as the lowest economic approval ratings of his entire White House career, with just 43% of Americans approving of his handling of the United States economy. Now, the plunge in America's overall confidence is the president's handling of the economy is especially concerning, and it's significant given that Donald Trump won the 2024 presidential election against then Vice President Kamala Harris on a platform of lowering inflation and revitalizing an economy still recovering from COVID. He said he was going to fix all this on day one, like in the war in Ukraine. Remember that? But since he took office, Trump has focused largely on imposing, then pausing, then reinstating, then pausing tariffs, as opposed to his promised tax cuts and deregulation. The startup tariffs, as you're well aware, was created uncertainty in the stocks. As you know, the stock markets have been going and then and it's just mass confusion, just like Trump's administration, mass confusion. So about 59% of Americans disapprove of Trump's sweeping tariffs, too, just so you know, on imported goods. Now, the Pew Research Center survey also found this as well, so about the tariffs. So, again, ladies and gentlemen, when you got this kind of stuff going on, as far as tariffs and everything else, and the confusion that now exists in the White House, it's, what are you going to do? he's up and down, and he wants tariffs on China, then he doesn't. So it's you can easily see why his approval ratings are starting to tank, because people elected him to fix the economy and the border. Now, he has done extremely well with the border as far as people have been surveyed, but he has done terrible on far as the economy. People's paychecks are shrinking, and cost of goods are going up, and it really bothers people. So what are you going to do? Well, let's move on with other great news that's going on. Yes, Mark Rubio is now cleaning house in the State Department. And as you're well aware of, and this is because of the Doge little thing that's been going on. So he's going to be doing some reorganization, and he's doing this with the help of Elon Musk. It looks like he's going to try to eliminate 132 agency offices dedicated to the efforts like advancing democracy and combating extremism. It will also is going to lead to the State Department eliminating hundreds of positions intended for career officials. Their jobs are gone. Additionally, top officials are going to be asking to reduce their offices by an additional 15%. And for us, as far as from Washington, D.C., why does this matter? Eliminating all these positions and offices? Well, Secretary Rubio says this will all make the department more efficient, eliminating bloat and redundancy as the United States looks to navigate to one of the most dangerous international moments since the end of World War II. But some see it as a much deeper sign of America's inward turn as we enter a new multipolar age. Now, as you're well aware of, but Marco Rubio also did an about face just this past couple of days about all the green cards and the students, the thousands of students, to be as a matter of fact, that are here in the United States getting an education, earning their bachelor's and a master's degree. Remember, he's going to deport thousands of these immigrants that are here on green cards getting an education. Well, he did an about face and said, well, I think I'll just kind of let that go. So I apologize. And so who knows what's going to be going on there. It's absolutely crazy what Donald Trump does with, giving directions to Marco Rubio. Say, I want you to do this. No, I don't want you to do that. Yes, I want you to do this. Yeah, I don't want you to do that. So what are you going to do? Okay, so let's move on. So, the next thing about news here that's absolutely really crazy that's going on is this thing with Telsa. Now, there's been some stuff going on with the Trump administration says that it actually has no plans now to fulfill a $400 million armored Telsa contract. And this is a kind of a funny story, especially since we all know that Doge is run by the great Telsa guy himself, Elon Musk. So they're going to abandon the plan that they were going to purchase $400 million worth of armored Telsa vehicles. And this was after a public document came out. Yes, they dug it out, detailing federal contracts for the fiscal year 2025. And it gained wide attention because they were expected to purchase $400 million worth of these Telsas, which was slated for September of this year. Now, of course, it's on hold, according to the State Department, which now says it has no plans to actually fulfilling that contract since you guys found it. The potential federal purchase drew scrutiny since Telsa's chief executive, Elon Musk, is also a top White House official who has been leading the department and cutting expenses. But he found ways to spend $400 million but have the government buy his vehicles. Now, since you want to shrink the federal workforce and you want to cut all this money, how are you going to get up with $400 million to buy my product, huh? That's called corruption, isn't it? Anyway, the controversy started in a very Washington way as a line item in a government spreadsheet, but it was really deeply buried on the State Department's website. It appeared as if the State Department was actually trying to take steps to award Elon Musk Telsa, which is, as you know, he's having financial problems with that, the $400 million to buy those armored electric vehicles to securely transport diplomats. The move was a more lucrative contract to perhaps get him even more money. So it was actually controlled by a high-profile ally of President Trump, and he seemed so bold it was surprised. For this guy, who was a longtime ally, he even came out and said, "What the hell are you doing here, guy?" So that's how weird it looked. So, if you're going to do something, of course, they tried to say that, well, this is all the Biden administration. You know how they like to talk about the Biden administration, especially, Caroline Leavitt. Well, the Biden administration, they're the ones that actually had all this. Everything that goes on, they find in the news, it's all the Biden administration's fault. But let's do some digging on this. The documents show that the State Department, during the Biden administration, they had planned to spend only $483,000 in the fiscal year 2025 on buying electric vehicles and $3 million for supporting equipment like charging stations. And yes, they were looking at Tulsa, but they made no commitment whatsoever. It actually represented less than 1% of the hundreds of millions of dollars likely destined for the Tulsa vehicles after the Trump administration quietly revised, the former president's budget, and the State Department. So there you go. That's quite a vast discrepancy, wouldn't you say? Well, I would. Okay, let's go on with some other news that's taking place here in the wonderful world of the Trump administration. So, other things that are going on is, let's move on. We're going to scroll by here and see what happens. Yes. Let's have some good news, ladies and gentlemen. A federal judge on this past week blocked Trump administration directives that threatened to cut federal funding for public schools with diversity, equity, and inclusion, otherwise known as DEI. The ruling came in a lawsuit brought by the National Education Association as well as the American Civil Liberties Union. And, this American Civil Liberties Union, they're always active on doing things to protect people's rights. And this, they accused the Republican administration of violating teachers' due process and the First Amendment rights. In this February, the United States Education Department told schools and colleges that they needed to end any practices that differentiates people based on their race. Earlier this month. That's what the White House was trying to do. Now, the department ordered states to gather signatures from local school systems, which they did, certifying compliance with civil rights and laws, that including the rejection of what the federal government calls illegal DEI practices. And there's absolutely nothing illegal about DEI practices. So even though the schools, went ahead and got these signatures for what they were supposed to do, it is nice that the judge and the Civil Liberties Union finally stepped in and said enough is enough. And they filed a lawsuit, and the judge looked at it, and they stopped these practices. So, we're glad to see that happen because it was just getting out of hand, and it actually was just unbelievable what's going on with this DEI. I'll do a longer deep dive into DEI and what it really stands for in a future podcast. But let's move on. Let's talk about Pete Hegseth. Yes, this guy is actually back in the news again. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth got caught with his hands on the phone again, and he's facing renewed scrutiny after news surfaced again that he used a second encrypted group chat to share with sensitive military information about last month's strikes in Yemen. Hegseth's days in the role of his new role may be numbered, as the White House has begun looking for a new Secretary of Defense, although they're claiming they still back Pete totally 100%. Now, an official not authorized to speak publicly recently told news media that the same official also confirmed that Hegseth shared details about last month's strikes in Yemen with, among other people, his wife and brother in a group chat on Signal. Now, his personal phone, though the encrypted messages app is considered safe to use by these all departments in the White House, He still seems to want to, let people in on other things on his chat. As I said, Trump publicly says, "Hey, he's got my full support," but behind the scenes, there has some changing in the wind. What's really sad about all of this, folks? It's just not Pete. It's everybody that is currently serving in a cabinet position in the White House. The left hand never knows what the right hand is talking about, and 90% of these new appointees, and it's been the first 100 days of the White House, they have no experience. That's the trouble. You've got TV celebrities, you've got newscasters, you've got other people serving in this administration that they're there because they got billions of dollars or they have, personality connections. That's the only reason they're there. They're extremely wealthy or they look good on TV. And that's all Trump cares about, money and how you look on TV. I don't give a crap about your actual experience. And it's now starting to show. And I'm just saying this as an outsider looking in, and millions of other people around the world agree with me. There's a lot of mass confusion, and we really, we don't know how to handle this. And Pete's gone around and tried to fire, a lot of his people that's in his outside inner circle that he doesn't like. He's saying the Pentagon's leaking the information. And it's not, it's not my fault, and so, why should you blame me? So, and that's really where we're at here. So, okay, so let's move on. So, another person that is in the news is the former CBS producer for 60 Minutes, and that is Mr. Bill Owens, and it's pretty sad what's going on here with Bill. Let's talk about him. So Bill Owens, the executive producer of the CBS News flagship 60 Minutes, has announced that he's stepping aside after all these years on the program. And he's going to resign from the top job. And he's saying he no longer has any control over the show. And in a memo that was obtained by CNN, the competitive network, Owens said that the staff for the last few months have made it clear that he would not be allowed to run the show as I've always liked to run it, or make independent decisions based on what was right for the 60 Minutes program. And he's pretty upset about that. And you really can't blame the guy. The show's not what we stand for anymore. From every angle, over time, with everything I could, I am stepping aside so the show can move forward. And how that's going to move forward, Owens doesn't know, nor does he even care anymore. The show was just too important for the country, and it has continued, just not with me as executive producer. And shortly after the reports of Owens' resignation emerged, some staffers quietly let it leak that what's really going on is it's the lawsuit that Trump has against CBS's 60 Minutes and the CBS network. And the new owners, which is Paramount, they're trying to, purchase the arm Sundance Productions and merge the two, and they need the FCC approval to do that. And when you've got a lawsuit filed by Trump because he says CBS doesn't show him in the light that he would like to have them showed, and this is a whole other topic, is Trump trying to control the national media. That is, a violation of the Constitution and First Amendment rights and freedom of the press, but he wants all the networks to put him in a perfect light. And again, this is, I don't want to go into it, but just take a look at some of the countries like North Korea and Russia, and then you can see why, when the media is controlled by the monarchy and the presidents and the kings and everybody else, and having everything that's showing you don't show me in a bad light, or I'll take you out. So, that's what he was trying to do with CBS, and they're actually starting to bid now. So what do? They get rid of Mr. Owens. But, the lawsuits are baseless, and it stressed Owen's refusal to really apologize or bend, while noting that the top producer fought for the broadcast and for independent journalism, and that cost him his job because he was fighting for it. And it's all because that, Paramount, which actually owns CBS, they want to buy Sundance, and so and David Ellison actually owns Sundance Media. So Redstone, she's the big cheese with Paramount, she wants it resolved, so she got rid of him and told Trump, "Well, I'm sorry, we will work with what we got to do here. We apologize, and I got rid of Bill Owens, so can we now just move on? So you can tell your FCC guy too that we approve the sale of Sundance to us." So yeah, that's how things really go in this world that we now live in today. So I don't know. So let's move on to our top story that we now have going on. And this is where I take a little bit of a deep dive when I say I've got the top story. So here we go. In shelters across America, in New York specifically, children sit in front of a computer and television screens, appearing virtually in real court proceedings. I'm talking about children without parents, without legal representation. Now, they swivel in chairs, they walk in circles, and they play with their hair. They have no idea what's going on, while immigration judges address them on the screens in front of them. Now, here's the judge. The reason we're here is because the government of the United States wants you to leave the country that you're presently in. This was said by Judge Ubaid al-Haq while he's presiding from a courtroom virtually, and he told a group about a dozen kids on a recent morning on WebEx. This is virtual video. "It's my job to figure out if you have to leave." And he continued, "It's also my job to figure out if you should stay." The parties included a 7-year-old boy wearing a shirt with a pizza cartoon on the front of it who spun a toy windmill while the judges were speaking. Remember, these little kids don't understand any of this. And there was an 8-year-old girl and her 4-year-old sister in a tie-dye shirt who squeezed a pink plushy toy and stuffed it into her sleeve. And none of the children, as I said, were accompanied by parents or legal adults. Only shelter workers who have no authority to say anything, who are taking care of these kids, and they helped them log onto the hearing. That's all they did. They helped them so the judge could see them. Now, lawyers say an increasing number of migrant children are making immigration court appearances without any legal representation, without any parents, because they've already been deported, and it's going to lead to more kids getting deported. And guess what? The Trump administration on March 21st terminated, yes, he terminated part of a $200 million contract that funds attorneys and other legal services for unaccompanied children. He just got rid of it. Those are the children who arrive without parents or any legal guardians, and typically instead come with aunts, uncles, or older siblings, according to immigration officials. And there's no attorneys, though. There is no legal representation. And by the Constitution and by due process, these kids are entitled to a defense attorney. They are entitled for due process, and they are not getting it. The Sixth Amendment guarantees lawyers for the accused in all criminal prosecutions. But those protections do not apply to people facing deportation. Why? Because it's civil, and there's your loophole. Civil versus criminal. And although immigrant children facing deportation do have the right to hire an attorney, they don't have any money. They are not provided with one if they or their families can't afford to hire one. So as a result, these children end up in a very complex, sad situation where adversarial legal proceedings with no one to protect their rights happens. Now, why is it critical for children facing deportation to have an attorney? Because without an attorney, children in deportation proceedings might not know their rights or the legal pathways for them to remain in the country. Can you imagine a 6 or 7-year-old person understanding what they can and cannot do? Hell no. So the United States offers a number of legal protections for children who may face dangers to their lives, liberty, and the well-being in their home and in the country. But special immigration juvenile status, for example, is a one legal protection for children who have been abused, abandoned, or neglected. But it doesn't include immigration deportation. So the United States government can also grant asylum for those fleeing persecution in their home countries. But, as you know, in this day and age, with the Trump administration, that's not going to happen. Of course not. And so he wants nothing to do with these kids. He's basically saying, get them the hell out of the United States. And I don't care where their parents are. It's just more immigrants that I want to get rid of because that's what the United States people hired me to do. He likes to use this term, the American people. Well, I'm an American person. I didn't ask you to get rid of children like that, did I? Of course not. And, of course, they haven't complied with a federal court order that was directing them to fund the legal representation for unaccompanied immigrant children. That's right. There was a federal judge that said you need to get these kids legal representation. And Trump basically told the judge, go to hell. And there's been lawsuits. Several groups have sued the Department of Homeland Security on just as recently as March 28th after the federal government refused to renew a contract that funds attorneys who can help these young migrant children who came to the United States alone or were separated from their parents. Many of these kids are U.S. citizens. Yes, they are. And this has happened with a 2-year-old just recently. She's a U.S. citizen. They deported her. This is pretty dang sad, and I don't know where else we can go with this. When you've got kids like this who are getting, for lack of a better word, shipped out of here with absolutely no way to shape or form to get any legal help. So I just don't know where we're going to go with this. This is the day of age of Donald Trump, He's deporting anybody and anything. I've done a recent podcast. They're now going on our Native American Indian reservations and trying to deport them. He's picking up people left and right who, by the color of their skin or brown or how they're dressed or what, they must be an illegal immigrant. They're being picked up. We saw a judge get arrested because she was helping an illegal immigrant hide, and so they arrested her. She just recently got released, but here we go. So what else is Donald Trump doing? Well, he just signed an executive order, or a memorandum, if we to call it, this past week. It's aimed at Act Blue. Now, the Act Blue is the leading Democratic fundraising platform, and a senior White House official told NBC News just recently that the action is related to how the platform verifies and reports its donors and users. And they're saying that the Act Blue has supporters or donors that are out of the country. And so therefore, they're going to get rid of it. It's basically the primary funding tool for the Democratic Party and Democratic candidates, and in many cases, the default donation option on the Democratic campaign website. You just push a button and donate. And it's widely considered one of the pillars of the party's digital ecosystem. So the platform works as a conduit. So it's facilitating individual donations for campaigns and for nonprofits as well, and taking a 3.9% processing fee on this platform. Now, most donations, so says Megan Hughes, she's a spokesperson for Act Blue, said the organization strictly abides by all federal and state laws governing its activity. That's what she said. Now, Act Blue plays a very vital role in enabling all Americans to participate in our democracy, and the organization strictly abides by all federal and state laws. But Trump doesn't care. It has something to do with somebody that's against the Republicans. Get the hell rid of it. I know it sounds funny, but that's really what it is. She says, we're going to stand steadfast in defending the rights of all Americans to participate in our democracy, and Act Blue will continue its mission undeterred and uninterrupted, providing safe, secure fundraising platform for the millions of grassroots donors who rely on our platform, and that is Act Blue. So, again, because it's a Democratic Party and the Act Blue platform may, in their opinion, have donors from outside the United States, are going to go after it. But, when we had our other president in office, Joe Biden, Trump was saying, that stuff's all, illegal, all the way they get the money. And of course, the Democrats at times have gone after the Republicans just as well. I'll be fair about that. But it's just kind of funny how he's just consistently going after people and organizations or anything. Like he said, when he said he was going to get back in the White House, he was going to go after his enemies. And that is exactly what he's doing. So there you go with Act Blue. Now, this next story, it is funny, but it is also sad, taking us back to the 1950. And this has to do with Trump and paying $5,000 for women to have kids. Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy, he has 9 kids. Now, this is why it's funny. There is a lot of people on the White House cabinet that have a lot of kids. And they now think that everybody else in the United States should have a lot of kids because the U.S. population is starting to drop, because a lot of women today are not having kids, or either having them later and not at all, because a lot of women have entered the professional workforce, and they have, they're either single, or they just, their spouse or significant other, they just don't want to have kids. And Elon Musk, as you know, he has, we really don't know. We really don't know how many kids Elon Musk has. He's got a few scattered around the world. But, and Trump, he has 5 kids, and J.D. Vance, he has 3. But you do remember J.D. Vance's quote, he has a distaste for the childless cat ladies. So, let's all have kids. So what are we going to do about, our declining population of babies? So they're coming up with some ideas of how we can maybe increase the U.S. birth rate. And how are we going to do that? Well, the Trump administrations and their officials have been meeting with activists and conservative groups to discuss proposals designed to spur another baby boom like we had in post-World War II, including offering them $5,000 a baby bonus for new parents. If that sounds like a weird policy for this administration, it really is not. The bonuses could take the form of a child tax credit, and we would require an act of Congress, of course, which they, it's all Republican. They may actually just pass this. But it only apply to parents who are married. In other words, male and female. If you got a gay couple, sorry, you're out. If you got 2 lesbians married, sorry, you're out. This is an unequal benefit, considering single parents are more likely to be Black and Hispanic, according to national statistics. But their ultimate goal is, of course, not just for more babies, but for more families formed. So says Emma Walters, a policy analyst at the Heritage Foundation, which is among the groups conferring with the administration about how to get more babies in the United States. And they're also proposing more research funding, which Trump he's cut a lot of research funding, but for kids, let's go ahead and do that. Let's have research funding on natural fertility to encourage women to chart their menstrual cycles and to get pregnant. Let's pay for that. That would be pretty cool, huh? So Simone Collins says she has sent a draft executive orders to the White House proposing, among other things, a National Medal of Motherhood Merit Medal for mothers with more than 6 children. All of this is in response to the fact that fertility rates in the United States have been falling somewhat dramatically, dropping to an historic low, actually, according to the Centers for Disease Control, which we want to get rid of that, too, the Center for Disease Control. We don't need to track that either. The White House's apparent interest is more prolific procreation is undercut entirely by the slaughter of women's health initiatives under Trump's watch. So this is what's going on here. You've got Donald Trump, who wants this $5,000 a baby thing to get through Congress and pay women to, have babies. But in turn, he has cut entirely billions of dollars from women's health, from our health department. We don't care about your health. We just want you to crank out kids. Okay, can you do that for us? Because privileged white men, we want more. We want you to have more babies. We want you to stay home, be barefoot and pregnant, and we don't want gay couples to adopt babies because they're not really a family. That's not going to happen. So two guys that have kids. We want males and females to mate. That's what we want. So, yeah, and even though the Health and Human Services has lost billions of dollars to take care of women's health, we'll pay you $5,000 to have kids. And this is another thing you don't really stop and think about. Do you think $5,000 is going to cover a family to have kids? You know how much it really costs to raise a child today in this United States? And this is why a lot of families have deferred from having children, because a lot of women are now in the professional field. But we want to get rid of women in the professional field. You're a woman, so you need to stay home and have kids. That's what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to be out there working in a professional career. And so this story, folks, is nuts. That's really what it is. To pay people to have kids, I beg to differ that that's what we should be doing. So let's move on to our last story for this particular podcast. And that is that here in the state of Florida, my good buddy, Ron DeSantis, is back in the news. Ron DeSantis is back on the defensive over questions about how $10 million in state money came to be used to fund a political campaign. In 2 terms as governor, Ron DeSantis has enjoyed pretty much strong support from the Republican-controlled legislature. And that's true. I remember, I am doing this podcast from Florida. But now the Republicans in the State House of Representatives say the alleged misuse of funds may warrant a criminal investigation. And Ron DeSantis' war on woke may be losing some steam. The allegations involves $10 million that was paid to Florida by Centre, a company that provides managed care to Medicaid recipients. The money was part of a $67 million settlement by the company after it was charged with overbilling taxpayers for medications. $10 million, folks, of that money for a settlement was paid directly to a nonprofit group, Hope Florida. And guess who runs Hope Florida? Ron DeSantis' wife, Casey. Yeah, she runs Hope Florida. And then she founded that actual foundation. And Casey says, well, it's to help people move off government assistance into a community-based program. Now, an investigation by state lawmakers found that after receiving it, Hope Florida transferred the $10 million to 2 dark money political groups. What does dark money political groups mean? It means that these groups do not have to report, or they're not required to disclose where they get their money. The 2 groups then sent some $8.5 million to a political committee that was campaigning against an amendment to legalize recreational marijuana in the state of Florida. And of course, as you know, that got defeated. Barely, but it got defeated. There was a 49% favor to have recreational marijuana in the state of Florida, but the legislature changed that around to where it had to be a 60% threshold, and so therefore the initiative lost. And there was a lot of money spent on TV against legalizing recreational marijuana. Now we know how that was all paid for. It was done by a group controlled by DeSantis' then Chief of Staff, now Florida Attorney General James Utmeyer. Republican lawmakers, including Representative Alexandre, said that they believe that the transaction was illegal At a hearing at the Health Care Subcommittee in Florida's House of Representatives, he stated that there was no question that these were Medicaid funds steered by the governor's chief of staff through secret and clandestine actions to his own political committee. And that's true. They had a recent hearing, and they subpoenaed some people to show up to testify on this, including the state attorney general. He was a no-show. So that kind of tells you that I think this, in fact, was an illegal consideration, even though Ron DeSantis continues to go about on press junkets saying that it was all perfectly legal and there's no basis to this. And this is just by unhappy legislatures because, they're not doing what I need them to do, and we all need to get back to work. And Casey DeSantis, she wants to run for the governor in 2028, and it's not looking good either. There's not much support for her. In fact, President Trump hasn't even endorsed her. He's endorsed another candidate. So there you go. And that is my podcast for this week on The Right Has Left. I'm Roy Garden. I hope you enjoyed it. I look forward to your comments. Until next time, you all try to have a great day. Take care.